I thank DOT for finalizing the Protect Grant agreement for the historic and beautiful Mount Hope Bridge in Rhode Island just last week. That Protect program recognizes that climate change is a real driver of infrastructure risk and that investments in resilience now save big money in the long run.
Infrastructure is not just about asphalt, bridges, and steel. It is about lives saved, communities connected, and future secured against the mounting pressures of climate change and neglect. As Senator Sheldon Whitehouse emphasized in his opening remarks, the next surface transportation reauthorization bill is not merely a technical exercise, it is a moral responsibility. America stands at a crossroads. Invest wisely in resilient, safe, and climate-conscious transportation, or risk continued loss of life, wasted dollars, and a weakened national economy. The evidence is overwhelming. The stakes are undeniable. The question is whether we will act with the urgency required.
Thank you, Chairman, for this hearing. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Welcome particularly to Mayor Gallego, who will be introduced later by her Arizona kinsman, Senator Kelly. As we consider the next surface transportation reauthorization bill, I'd be remiss not to remind everyone that Democrats will have no reason to do a bill if we have an administration that will not faithfully execute the laws, meaning both sides of any compromise we reach. On the bright side, DOT has made substantial progress obligating money to hundreds of previously frozen grants. New draft guidance for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, NEVI, was submitted to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. This is progress. But NEVI is still stalled at OIRA, and periodic threats continue to politically disfavored projects like high-speed rail and congestion pricing. I want to get a bill done, and I have given my team the green light to work on details. DOT is moving in the right direction, particularly when compared to the dumpster fire of political corruption at the Environmental Protection Agency. Here in Congress, there's bipartisan agreement about strong federal commitment to our infrastructure. But the American Society of Civil Engineers still gives our roads a D+. We have more than 43,000 bridges still classified as structurally deficient. 39% of our public roads are still in poor or mediocre condition. Close to 40,000 people still die each year on our roadways in the wealthiest country in the world. Our directive is clear: work together to build on the early successes of the IIJA and further improve our transportation infrastructure. As we do this, prudent investments must account for anticipated conditions. Annual costs for climate-related damage to road and rail infrastructure are expected to reach nearly $20 billion a year by 2050, with approximately $1.5 billion in costs for bridges alone. A recent report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Allstate found that for every dollar invested in infrastructure resilience, communities across the country save $13 in post-disaster losses. 1 to 13 is smart spending. I thank DOT for finalizing the Protect Grant agreement for the historic and beautiful Mount Hope Bridge in Rhode Island just last week. That Protect program recognizes that climate change is a real driver of infrastructure risk and that investments in resilience now save big money in the long run. Pollution-driven climate change is costing lives and livelihoods. To pretend otherwise is to abdicate our moral and fiscal responsibility. The next reauthorization bill must and will take climate change seriously. We may not have to say it, but we have to do it. Transportation is the largest source of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. 1.8 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere each year, more than a quarter of total U.S. emissions. Just last week, 4 communities were ravaged by 1-in-1,000-year rainstorms. Climate change is making floods like those in Texas, North Carolina, New Mexico, and Illinois more intense, more deadly, and more frequent. Homeowners insurance in coastal and wildfire risk areas is collapsing, taking down real estate values, and presenting a systemic financial danger to our economy. Our transportation system is driving this climate upheaval, and that, in turn, challenges the functionality of our transportation system. In addition to climate safety, the next reauthorization bill must prioritize roadway safety. The persistently high number of traffic fatalities and their immeasurable pain and suffering is unacceptable. This is not just driver and passenger safety, but the safety of those walking, biking, and working on construction sites or responding to emergencies. Many of our roads that are in poor condition are the local roads that carry a large share of our vehicle miles traveled, exacerbating the safety risks. As we put pen to paper on this next transportation package, let us be clear-eyed, let us follow the evidence, let us make the investments in our transportation systems that reduce emissions, that prioritize safety, that bolster resilience, and that meet the real-life needs of the communities we serve. With that, I look forward to working together with the Chair and my Republican colleagues on this bill, and I look forward to hearing the perspectives of our witnesses.
America's transportation system is the backbone of its economy and the daily lifeline for millions of citizens. Yet despite being the wealthiest nation in the world, the U.S. finds itself grappling with failing infrastructure, unsafe roads, and a climate crisis that directly threatens the very system meant to keep the country moving. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's recent remarks on the upcoming Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill shed light on both the opportunities and dangers before us. His call to action is not simply about renewing legislation, but about fundamentally rethinking the priorities embedded in America's transportation investments. The context is sobering. The American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, has long graded U.S. infrastructure poorly, most recently assigning roads a near-failing grade of D+. More than 40,000 bridges are deemed structurally deficient, and nearly 40% of public roads are in poor or mediocre condition. Every year, close to 40,000 people die in roadway incidents, an appalling toll for a nation that prides itself on innovation and safety. These statistics underscore not just inefficiency, but also tragedy on a scale that should be unacceptable to policymakers and the public alike. Yet the challenges extend far beyond potholes and steel fatigue. Climate change is amplifying risks across the entire transportation sector. Whitehouse points to a projection of $20 billion annually in climate-related damages to road and rail infrastructure by 2050, with bridges alone accounting for $1.5 billion. These are not abstract numbers. Every dollar wasted in post-disaster rebuilding could have been saved many times over with proactive investments in resilience. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Allstate report that for every dollar invested in resilient infrastructure, communities save $13 in post-disaster recovery costs. This 1-to-13 return ratio demonstrates that climate-smart spending is not only environmentally sound but fiscally prudent. The evidence is already before us. Just last week, 4 American communities were devastated by what meteorologists classified as a 1-in-1,000-year rainstorm. Catastrophic floods in Texas, North Carolina, and Illinois highlight the accelerating frequency of extreme weather events. These disasters are no longer rare, they are becoming the new normal. Wildfires on the West Coast are collapsing insurance markets, dragging down property values, and creating systemic financial risks. Hurricanes batter coastal regions with increasing intensity, while rising sea levels threaten major transit corridors and ports. At the heart of the crisis is transportation itself. The sector is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, responsible for approximately 1.8 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide annually, more than a quarter of total emissions. Cars, trucks, airplanes, and freight systems are not only dependent on fossil fuels, but also designed around an outdated model of endless consumption and sprawl. As Whitehouse stresses, we cannot ignore the fact that our transportation system is both a driver of climate change and one of its chief victims. To meaningfully address these challenges, the next transportation bill must be bold. Incrementalism will not suffice. Policymakers must prioritize 4 essential pillars: emissions reduction, safety, resilience, and equity. Emissions reduction. Electric vehicle (EV) programs, high-speed rail investments, and congestion pricing are not political luxuries, they are practical necessities. The Department of Transportation's DOT progress on EV grant programs is commendable but remains incomplete. Major projects are stalled, and the political will to fully embrace clean transit remains fragile. A truly effective reauthorization bill would accelerate EV infrastructure deployment, expand rail networks to reduce car dependency, and incentivize states to adopt congestion pricing in urban centers. These policies cut emissions while also reducing traffic, improving air quality, and enhancing quality of life. Safety. The carnage on America's roads is a national scandal. Traffic deaths remain stubbornly high, with tens of thousands of lives lost annually and countless others permanently altered by injury. Safety cannot be an afterthought. Roads must be redesigned to prioritize not just drivers, but also pedestrians, cyclists, construction workers, and first responders. Federal funding should require states to adopt Vision Zero policies, an approach that treats every traffic death as preventable rather than inevitable. Local roads, which carry a disproportionate share of vehicle miles, must receive more attention, as neglect at the community level often produces the deadliest outcomes. Resilience. Climate-proofing transportation is no longer optional. Bridges, highways, and transit lines must be built to withstand floods, heat waves, and wildfires. This means integrating updated climate models into all federal transportation planning, ensuring that new projects are designed with a 50 to 100-year horizon in mind. It also means retrofitting existing infrastructure to avoid catastrophic failures. The Mount Hope Bridge in Rhode Island offers a model. Federal grants have been secured to strengthen this historic structure, recognizing what upfront investments today will prevent far greater losses tomorrow. Equity. Beyond climate and safety, the bill must address the historic inequities baked into America's transportation system. For decades, highway construction has disproportionately devastated low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. Investment must now be reoriented to repair those harms through improved public transit, safer local roads, and infrastructure that genuinely serves the communities it passes through rather than dividing them. Whitehouse's remarks frame transportation reauthorization as a test of both political integrity and moral responsibility. He reminds us that while progress at the DOT is commendable, it pales in comparison to what is needed. The failures of the Environmental Protection Agency under previous administrations illustrate the dangers of political corruption in infrastructure policymaking. If laws are not faithfully executed, bipartisan compromise loses meaning. Trust, once broken, is hard to restore. The way forward is clear. Policymakers must act with courage and foresight. They must follow evidence, not ideology. They must recognize that every delay, every half measure, every compromise with climate denial or infrastructure neglect comes at the expense of lives, dollars, and America's long-term competitiveness. The stakes could not be higher. Infrastructure is destiny. The roads we build determine the shape of our communities. The emissions we tolerate determine the livability of our planet. The safety measures we adopt or fail to adopt determine whether thousands of families will face unimaginable grief each year. The choice before Congress is stark but simple. Build smarter, safer, cleaner, and fairer, or consign the nation to continued decay, disaster, and death on the roads. Senator Whitehouse's voice is not one of pessimism but of urgency. The work ahead is immense, but the rewards of bold action are far greater than the costs. A future where infrastructure strengthens communities, saves lives, protects the planet, and pays economic dividends is within reach. It is a future we cannot afford to ignore. The next transportation bill will be more than a line item in federal legislation. It will be a declaration of national priorities. As Senator Whitehouse makes clear, the path forward demands investments that reduce emissions, prioritize safety, and build resilience against climate threats. Failure to act is not neutral. It is a choice that guarantees higher costs, more deaths, and greater instability. The nation has been warned. Now it must decide whether to invest in the infrastructure of the future or remain trapped in the failures of the past. Senator Whitehouse's voice is not one of pessimism but of urgency. The work ahead is immense, but the rewards of bold action are far greater than the costs. A future where infrastructure strengthens communities, saves lives, protects the planet, and pays economic dividends is within reach. It is a future we cannot afford to ignore. The next transportation bill will be more than a line item in federal legislation. It will be a declaration of national priorities. As Senator Whitehouse makes clear, the path forward demands investments that reduce emissions, prioritize safety, and build resilience against climate threats. Failure to act is not neutral. It is a choice that guarantees higher costs, more deaths, and greater instability. The nation has been warned. Now it must decide whether to invest in the infrastructure of the future or remain trapped in the failures of the past.